Okay, good morning. This is day 28 of these videos, and they are videos to explain a day in the life of me as a schizophrenic a human with schizophrenia, and some of my thoughts and daily things going on, and also to practice being on camera as a life skill, keep up with that. And so I will just reveal that schizophrenia is part of is can be chalked up oftentimes to something that's going on with the cognitive war that NATO talks about, and it is inflicted upon a person to drive them crazy or control them or for some other purpose. And I discussed this in the beginning of all my videos a little bit. So okay. Now, what I was going to talk about today is I actually quit my business class because of what happened with the fires. And like I say, the business class was a little creepy what was going on. It was synchronizing with what was going on with the fires, and it was all about business ethics. And I didn't feel comfortable what it was saying, and it was it was a little weird. I know it was trying to talk about ethics, but it was all kind of like saying stuff like you should question where your ethics come from and stuff like that. And I thought, like, okay, on the face of it, it's like it's good to ask people to question where their ethics come from, because maybe you should have a stronger set of ethics. But at the same time, maybe it's also saying like you should have a different set of ethics than what you've been taught or whatever. And maybe that's true to some extent, but I I don't I just feel like learn you should learn ethics from all over the place. If you learn some ethics growing up, and it's okay to question it, but I don't think you should disregard any ethics you've learned where from their various locations you've learned them. And just because something is a like religion or something, I learned ethics from religion. I'm not religious anymore, but I'm not going to sit there and say everything you learn in religion is should be disregarded, and our technology should be our god now. So it's a little curious that it was in that business class, and so it just didn't feel right. So I quit the class. All right, so in the last little episode thingy that I do here, I was talking about Dunedin, which is a city in New Zealand, and it was in my book, The Clanlands, and they were talking about the idea of the Scottish Free Church, and they said their idea of free was precisely the opposite. And this had me thinking of liberals and conservatives. Oftentimes in our society, our idea of free is precisely the opposite, and I don't want to repeat what I've said in the past about these things. But just like certain things that have gone on in the last decade or so with like liberalism and like stringent like speech restrictions and uh, just kind of orthodoxy in liberal side of things, and or the idea of like competition based world order where we're competing against each other, or like with conservatives and doing away with free choice for women in their bodies. And I mean, there's just so much on each side where you see like their idea of freedom was precisely the opposite of freedom. And I personally think the idea of freedom needs to be explored, and we need to expand upon it. And like I've said before, I think freedom is a little bit like an onion. Tyranny in one area is a freedom in another, and a freedom in one area is a tyranny in another. And it's not all the time. Sometimes tyrannies are just downright tyrannies, and so you have to guard against that. Okay, so I was getting into the baseball book and lots of eating and drinking, what that they talk about in this baseball book, which is like a book about taking little trips to baseball parks around the country. And I don't think I would be able to do the eating and the drinking because of my schizophrenia program. I'm not allowed to eat and drink whatever I want, and particularly in excess. Uh, so I have to be very careful of that. So, uh, but it does look cool. The baseball parks look cool. So I was noticing that, and I was remembering. So I talk about multifacetation a lot in these videos, and I discuss that, uh, in cognitive war, there's events in the world communicate to the schizophrenic or communicate to others about the schizophrenic, and it's like inside jokes, and it's all about kind of informing posterity about uh, some sort of form of control, or like a cult aspect to reality, or a cult. I think it's a cult, but okay. So I was remembering that I started to really question things when saw Saddam Hussein, Sad Dom Hussein, and I could probably get into this more in another segment, but that's just like an example of, like, people say, like, when you're a teenager, I was sad a lot, and they were saying like Sad Dom Hussein, like I was saying Hussein around here, particularly at school or things like that. And you're a teenager and you're going around all these like teenage kids, and you're just like, man, who's sane around here? I'm sad about this or something, like, and I need some sanity. And so, yeah, so like I say, with Big Brother, as like Big Brother, I'm like Winston and Big Brother, and yeah. All right. All right, I'm gonna segue. I'm gonna talk about some of those things in another segment where I get more into detail about those things, but that's just an example of like the idea of cognitive war and sending little messages out about people and political leaders in the world and their position for little inside jokes, like to inform posterity of an operation. So Katie Ledecky and Tokyo. Uh, in my book about Katie Ledecky, she's discussing how she went to Tokyo and she was up in a race against Ariana Titmus, who was the swimmer from Australia, and it was like a rivalry. And she said the media, quote, and she said loves rivalries. And she was saying, like, I think she was saying, like, it's they overdone the way they do these rivalries and stuff or whatever. Like, the swimmers are really kind of competing against their own times and our own marks and just trying to have swim a good race. And she lost this 400-meter race to Ariane Titmus. And she was saying it was really weird how they were describing the event as, quote, mouth-watering final event or whatever. And she won silver in this event that she felt really proud of winning silver, but the media was like questioning her, like, "Oh, are you disappointed in your loss and all this and and she was like saying, like, at any given moment in time, she was the second. At a given moment in time, she was the second best person in the world, and that is something to be proud of. And she swam a great race, and she just didn't come out on top. The other person touched the wall first, and so she the media was like kind of hounding her after this event and stuff, and all the headlines they were putting out and stuff, like a disappointment. And she ended up getting fifth in the next race, which was, I think, the 200, and she was disappointed in that one because it wasn't up with what she was feeling she could do. And so she went into this warming pool because she swims the numerous events, and she was trying to get her wits about her and get calm and organize her thoughts and stuff. And she started thinking about her grandparents, and she went into the next race, which is the 1500, which is her strongest race or whatever. She broke the world record at 16, I think, in this race. And she started singing a song to herself about her grandparents' names, like just with every stroke, like Grandpa Hagen, Grandma Berta, or something. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names. And she started singing a song about her grandparents' names to herself, and she uh, won the race, and she gave out a roar afterwards, and she thought saying her ancestors' names was about connecting her to all the women swimmers that came before her, and including her line of women in her family and stuff. And so she was very happy about that, and she got left out a roar after she won, and she felt very proud of that moment. And so I thought that was an interesting little thing about how the media that's supposed to be supporting these athletes, they get so hung up on winning gold, and like if you don't win gold you're a loser or something, you know. And this gets into my next little thing about this is where I'm talking about Katie Ledecky's book and We Are Not Enough actually overlap in some ways, even though you might see them as like kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. They a little bit overlap, a little intertwine a little. And in the next book, I was reading about a mother that borrowed sugar or flour in her well-to-do Connecticut neighborhood, and she the next day a bag of flour. Uh, she borrowed like a cup of flour or something, and the next day an entire bag of flour was on her doorstep, and she took it as like a slap in the face because she was like it kind of sent out the message like nobody can be in debt to anybody else, nobody can lean on anybody else for any sort of support or whatever. Like if you borrow a cup of sugar you better repay it with a bag of sugar or a bag of flour or something. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but like you could see like, oh, you know, like a different way of looking at it, like, you know, the expectations that we have. And in this book, it talks about like the mothers are conversing about like how they're constantly taking their kids to practices and they have to be like the perfect little people. And she refers to one of the mothers refers to this as the quote silos of hell, that they can't depend on other people in their community or family. Like they have to be totally independent and self-sufficient. And it was kind of interesting, like the people with different paths were all feeling judged. Like the mother that stayed at home felt like she was being judged for not bringing in an income and being ambitious, and the mother that went to work was feeling judged that she was not having the perfect little house for her family, or like that she did not have the she was not a fit mom or whatever. So like you have to be fit and ambitious and have your trophy kids and stuff. And I thought that was kind of interesting because like you know uh, the kids all have to win trophies, and you have to be fit and perfect and everything has to be all perfect and stuff. And it was just like people from all over experiences, like even if stay-at-home moms or whatever, were all experiencing this, and it was all driving them crazy. And this is all because of our high expectations for achievement. And anyway, so it I made me think about like, you know, the idea of like participation trophies and how that was like frowned upon by people for a long time. Like, oh, you got your participation trophy or whatever. And I don't know, you know, I'm running out of time here, but like I don't think participation trophies are a bad thing. I think they're a good thing. Okay, goodbye.